Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another live stream. Little bit of a different live stream today. We are going to do another episode of your unpopular Everton opinions. We did an episode of this a couple of months ago and it was basically an idea that I come up with where I asked people on X, formerly known as Twitter, to send me in their unpopular Everton-based opinions. So an opinion about anything to do with Everton Football Club. It could be to do with something from the past. It could be to do with something from the present. It could be to do with a player, a manager, I don't know, a season, whatever it might be, just an opinion that you have that you don't believe many other Evertonians share. You know the sort of, the gist. It's not a difficult thing to get your head around. And yet, we did an episode of it a couple of months ago. I thought it went quite well. We had a lot of interesting opinions in there. And, we spoke about them. I gave my opinion on them. People in the comments gave their opinions on them. And I thought, why not do another one? There's obviously no game this week, which is, I didn't ever think I'd find myself saying that not watching Everton during the week was disappointing. I'd have loved there to have been a game this week because it's an absolute joy to watch Everton Football Club at the moment. It's an absolute joy to watch those players who put that shirt on give 110% every single time they go on that pitch. But unfortunately, we're going to have to wait for the weekend where hopefully we can make it 4 wins out of 4 when we travel to Turf Moor to face Burnley. That was a rhyme. I didn't mean for it to rhyme, but it did. But in the meantime, I thought we'd have a little bit of fun and we'd go and have a look at some unpopular opinions around Everton Football Club. Are you watching live in the live comments and you've got an unpopular opinion that you want to be discussed, then either put it in the live comments now and I'll screenshot it and remember it for next time, or next time we're doing one of these videos, we'll usually tweet a day or so before, and then obviously give you an opportunity to go and post them on social media. So anyway, without further ado, let's get straight into it. Let's flip over to the screen here. As you can see, this was the tweet, the original video being on the 12th of October, and as you can see, I tweeted earlier on this afternoon that we're going to be doing another episode of this. So let's jump straight into it then. The first one, obviously underneath the tweet, being from Toffee Tower, who writes, Tom Davies might have done well under Dyche. Now, it's definitely an unpopular opinion because I feel like it's one that not a lot of people would have had Tom Davies had still been at the football club. I don't think it's something that will have been thought about an awful lot. I don't think there will have been many Evertonians during the course of this last sort of few months or so with everything that's gone on with the points deduction and how well Everton have been playing over the last few months. I don't think Tom Davies will have crept up in anybody's minds, especially given he's obviously gone to Sheffield United and not really had much of an impact there, and they've obviously had a really difficult start to the season themselves. Difficult to say. I think Tom had a lot of opportunities under a lot of different managers and ultimately never quite impressed. For somebody that very literally burst onto the scene with an absolutely fantastic solo goal against Manchester City and then a huge win, for him to go from that to a player that, like I said, just flattered to deceive for me in an Everton shirt was really disappointing, because I remember being at that game, when he scored that goal against Manchester City and thinking, wow, what a talent we have on our hands here. And of course, over the course of the next couple of months, the comparisons start to fly in. Wayne Rooney, Ross Barkley, natural comparisons. When an Everton Academy graduate is doing well in the first team, they're always compared to previous Everton Academy graduates who did well as well. But ultimately, Tom just never reached that level. He had some good games for Everton. I remember him being outstanding at Anfield when we won 2-0. I remember him having, as I said, the occasional performance where you looked and you thought, wow, there's really a player in there. But more often than not, he just wasn't quick enough to keep up with the game. He never really seemed to be I don't want to use the word committed because I don't want to tarnish him with the brush that he wasn't committed or he didn't give 110% or he wasn't particularly interested, because he was a boyhood Evertonian, so I'm sure every time he went on that pitch he did give 110%. I just don't think his style and the way in which he plays football and the way in which he, portrays himself on the football pitch, I don't think it's particularly suited to the Premier League and particularly suited to Everton Football Club. I've always thought Tom Davies would have been a good player playing over in Italy or somewhere like that, where it's a little bit slower and you've got a little bit more time on the ball, and it's much more based on the quality of the player as opposed to how quick they can turn on the ball or how fast their brain works. Whereas, I think Tom's got the talent. I just don't necessarily think he's got, the sharpness or the speed to be able to compete in the Premier League. I understand the notion that he would have done well under Dyche, because Dyche obviously is a much more compact manager, likes to tighten things up, doesn't like things to be particularly, doesn't like things to be particularly expansive, but Everton have played some wonderful football this season, scored some brilliant goals and played some absolutely excellent football. You only have to go and look at the third goal in the Newcastle game last week to see just how well this Everton team can play. So, on the opinion itself, Tom Davies might have done well under Dyche. He may well have. He may well have been given more opportunity under Sean Dyche. We've obviously seen Sean Dyche is not afraid to give players opportunities that he thinks deserve, a chance. Players like Michael Keane, obviously, for large parts of last season. Players like Ashley Young as well, who a lot of fans are not happy with starting every week, but yet still does. But I don't think he would have got into this midfield just on the basis of Everton now. I mean, you look at Everton's midfield now, Abdoulaye Doucouré, who's been absolutely unbelievable. We did a TikTok about Abdoulaye Doucouré yesterday. By the way, if you don't follow us on TikTok, get over there and go and follow us, the Mighty Blues EFC. We're basically just posting clips from the channel at the moment, but it helps get the channel out there. It helps people who mightn't have an hour to sit down and watch a game review. They'll be able to see some of the highlights from it and some of the discussion points. So get over there, go and follow us on TikTok. That would be absolutely brilliant. But yeah, you look at Doucouré, Onana, even Garner Gay, who's been absolutely fantastic of late in the absence of Onana. James Garner, who's been a complete revelation this season. I think Tom would struggle to get even in a match day squad, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. Maybe had he have been given his opportunity, he might have, but he would have had to have had, I think, a period of 5 to 10 games to really show what he's capable of, and I don't think he would have got it in this team under Dyche because of the the other options that we've got available to us. So yeah, there you go. Let's move on to the next one then. Big thanks to Toffee Tower for that one. Now this is a really, really interesting one, and it's the one that is on the title of the YouTube stream, and it is from General EFC. And it is, as much as I enjoyed it, having a manager of his class and prestige, getting Carlo was a horrendous mistake and set us back. Now, I always refer to the Carlo Ancelotti era of Everton Football Club as very much a fever dream. It felt at times like it wasn't real. It certainly, when it ended, felt like it wasn't real because it was such a short period of time. So much happened on the pitch, so much happened off the pitch during the period of time that it almost felt like we'd just watched a film about Everton, a Hollywood film, which was heavily over-dramatised about our football club, and it wasn't really what was happening. I understand the basis of the opinion, and I think, there's definitely a conversation to be had about the Carlo Ancelotti era of Everton Football Club and how that maybe acted as a catalyst to put us in the position that we've been in over the last couple of years or so. But that whole period of time was just absolutely mad, wasn't it? We'd gone from, 4 failed full-time managers. By full-time, I mean managers that, were brought in ultimately to go on for years and years, to come, as opposed to an interim manager, a Duncan Ferguson, even Sam Allardyce. We'd gone from having David Moyes' stability for over a decade to all of a sudden, in the space of 6 or 7 years, we'd had Roberto Martinez, we'd had Ronald Koeman, we'd obviously had Marco Silva as well, all very different managers, all very different CVs. Martinez come in, with the hope and expectation that he'd be at this football club for a number of years in the same way David Moyes was. That didn't quite work out, obviously. We then obviously brought Ronald Koeman in, this unbelievable footballer, played for Barcelona, excellent, done well at Southampton. He come in, spent a huge amount of money on players that, for the most part, were not good enough and were never going to have a future at the football club. He left. We then obviously got Allardyce on an interim basis. We then brought Marco Silva in, again, a decent season. Hope, are we going to do well here? Gets into the second season, doesn't do well, is ultimately sacked, and then we stumble across one of the greatest managers to ever grace the game in Carlo Ancelotti, and all of a sudden we'd gone from 10 years of stability and of having an identity in a football club that we all, loved and got behind. And, whether or not people were happy with David Moyes or believe it was a success, it was a period of time where you knew what Everton were and you knew what you were getting. We'd gone from that to, constant changing of managers, failing to have any form of identity, failing to have any form of way of playing, a lot of background noise and different managers bringing in different players, etc., etc., different managers with different styles. Martinez, who, was a very stubborn sort of possession-based manager. We then had Ronald Koeman, who was, not great in his approach to man management, fell out with a lot of the players, and then ultimately that come bit him back on the bottom. We then obviously had Marco Silva, up and coming, done relatively well at Watford. He come in, done well, but then when it started to go bad, he lost track a little bit. And then all of a sudden, just before Christmas, in walks one of the greatest managers to ever grace the game, if not the most decorated manager to ever grace the game. And all of a sudden, he's managing Everton Football Club. And then we went from the December where Carlo would come in. Obviously, performances had improved from the Marco Silva time, but there was still, elements of this team that needed to be replaced. There was still elements that needed to be changed because obviously it was the same team that Marco Silva had. So, it wasn't a case of waving a magic wand and everything's fixed overnight. We had some decent wins under Carlo and we had some poor performances as well. But then in the space of 3 months from December when he walked through the door to obviously March 2020, there was a global pandemic had happened, and all of a sudden football and life changed completely. And we went from having Carlo Ancelotti as our manager on whatever it was, £12 million a year, and all the excitement that brought, and all the excitement about going into the next summer transfer window and being able to spend, and Carlo getting the players he wants, etc., etc., to not knowing when football was going to be back and not knowing when we were going to be able to go and watch our football team in the flesh. And I think COVID had a huge effect on the Carlo Ancelotti era because, Carlo was a manager that was always going to come in with the expectation that he was given what he wanted, he was given the players that he wanted, he was given money to spend, and he was able to rebuild this squad. And I think the massive gamble that Everton made bringing Carlo Ancelotti into the football club was, well, two things. Firstly, was that they were going to have to give him what he wanted, in terms of players and things like that. And secondly, they put all of their eggs in the basket that we would finish in a European position, and therefore a large chunk of that money that we'd spent on players and wages and on Carlo would be repaid back by the fact that we'd be playing in Europe the following season, and we'd be able to balance that. Not only did that not happen, but also there was a global pandemic, and Everton, like every other Premier League club, lost hundreds of millions of pounds in not being able to sell gate receipts and various other things that happened across that year span where obviously the whole world was in lockdown and nobody really knew what was going on. So it was a really weird time, wasn't it? And then by the time we'd got out of it, we obviously, football came back. We finished that season. We got into the summer. We bought James Rodriguez, which didn't feel real. We bought Dukes. We bought Alan. We bought Ben Godfrey. And then, we won the first 7 games of the season and we were top of the league. Dominic Calvert-Lewin was scoring hat-tricks. James Rodriguez was being handed bottles of wine, scoring goals at Goodison. And although it was real and it happened, it just didn't feel real because of, as I said, multiple things. Firstly, James Rodriguez playing in an Everton shirt didn't feel real, managed by Carlo Ancelotti. But then, of course, watching Everton every week at Goodison Park with the stadium being completely empty and me and 40,000 other Evertonians being sat at home when typically we'd be sat in the stadium, that didn't feel very real either. So we spent a considerable amount of money, more money than we've spent since. We've not spent as much money as that since then. In one single window, and I think the massive gamble was that we'd finish in a European position, and then obviously the manager would stay and would take us into the next season playing in Europe, and obviously that wasn't the case. We didn't finish in a European position, and then ultimately left to Real Madrid, and it just so happens, ironically, as he was leaving the football club to go to Real Madrid, that was when obviously the doors to Goodison Park reopened and we were all able to go back and watch Everton on a more consistent basis. I know we were able to watch the occasional game, 6,000 I think we're able to go to. Was it Wolves at home, and Chelsea at home had a couple of thousand as well, or that might be the other way around. But as a collective, the first game we all went back to go and watch at Goodison Park was Southampton on the opening day of the season after, which was managed by Rafael Benitez, and it was a completely different situation then. So, yeah, I don't think the Carlo Ancelotti situation helped whatsoever. I think had we have had Rafa Benitez and that summer of spending only £1.5 million, had we have had that the year that COVID broke and we went into lockdown and we weren't able to go to the stadium and Everton were losing out on all sorts of money, I don't think there would have been as big of an effect on the football club as there was, because we made a huge gamble. And it was almost, I think, Farhad Moshiri's, I think that felt, for me, certainly feels for me, looking back now a few years later, that was Farhad Moshiri's big sort of stick or twist moment. It was his big, jumping in at the deep end with no armbands on, going for it. We'd failed before, obviously, with Ronald Koeman. He'd failed with Marco Silva. He brought Sam Allardyce in, which we're going to talk about in a moment. That didn't quite work for the fans either, and this was his big sort of, right, we can go and get Carlo now, let's go. Let's give him everything he wants. Let's give him whatever he wants wages-wise. Let's give him whatever he wants players-wise. And, let's go for this now on the hope that that will get us a European place, and then ultimately we'll be able to earn more money off that and build from there. As I said, not only did that not happen, but we obviously went into a global pandemic and lost a lot of money. So, yeah, as much as it being a huge mistake and set us back, yeah, you're probably right. As much as that might be an unpopular way of looking at things, it's a correct way of looking at things, because that summer of spending that much money and losing that much money in the same summer because of COVID and various other things was obviously not an not a beneficial thing for the football club. But also then it came for nothing, because we had James Rodriguez on 190 grand a week or whatever he was. He left after the year. Carlo on 12 million a year. He left after the year, and all of a sudden we were scrambling to get ex-Liverpool managers in, and then bringing in players that for free who were coming towards the end of their career, or Damari Gray for £1.5 million. So yeah, as much as this might be unpopular, I actually agree with it. However, I don't look back particularly negatively towards the Carlo Ancelotti era. When people talk about the points deduction, and when people talk about the money Everton have spent over the years and how frustrated that makes me feel and how angry that makes me feel, I always look back to the Ronald Koeman time, where we were spending hundreds of millions of pounds on 755 different centre attacking midfielders. That is what I attribute to the reason Everton are in the position that they were in last season and the season before. Yes, Carlo's time at the football club didn't help, and yes, Carlo's time at the football club ultimately was a factor, but it was also so surreal that we didn't spend a ridiculous amount of money in that summer. By the way, we spent 60 million quid, which was a lot of money, and as I said, there's more than we've spent since in a single summer. But it wasn't like we were spending 250 million like we'd done previous summers. So yeah, it definitely set us back. It definitely didn't help, and therefore it probably was a mistake. But what a weird time at the football club that was. What a weird, strange time to be an Evertonian, and yeah, as I said, only Everton could go and get a manager of Carlo Ancelotti's ilk, go and get players like James Rodriguez, who were absolutely magic on the ball, and then the world go into a global pandemic, and by the time we come out the global pandemic, those two, those key figures have left the football club and moved on, and we're now in the shit. But yeah, I think you are probably right. I'm just going to jump over to the live YouTube comments and have a little look at what people are saying, because we are unable to check the comments whilst we are in that mode. If you are enjoying, by the way, please hit the like button. It does only take a second if you're new to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe as well. That would mean a huge amount to me. Leave a like if you are enjoying. As I said, go and follow us on TikTok. Go and follow us on Twitter. Eugene says, smash the like button is right, Eugene. Lukey says, even and Cam up to Softies. Yes, my mate. Mister says, he was a mistake. Dice doing better, to be honest. The Blue says, what's up, mate? What's happening? Mister says, my one is that Awobi was always being the worst player to ever play in an Everton shirt. That is a strong opinion. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Fazza says, Sapnin. Amy says, I'm a newbie, so be kind. I felt he knew he had the job at Madrid after the March break. Well, I've heard a lot of stories about how and why Carlo Ancelotti made that switch, and one of them is that he actually phoned Real Madrid to ask them if they had any available players for Everton, and whilst he was on the phone, they said, oh, while you're here, we might have a job for you, and that was how he left. Who knows, you know, I've not spoken to Carlo, obviously, about that, so I wouldn't know, but, yeah, it was definitely a mad situation. Mineral says, Jack Rodwell or Barkley. I think Barkley was the better player, and I think Barkley did more than an Everton shirt, but I'm not particularly fond of either of them. Do it to them, Cam says Sam, and the Blue says commitment was the only thing Davies had. He had zero strength. Davies is like what Gomez would be if he was poor on the ball and always fell over. Yeah. Anyway, let's get into our next opinions, then we will jump back into the comments. Don't you worry about that. Isaac says, how are you, mate? Boss content, keep up the good work. Thank you very much, mate. Really do appreciate it. Let's jump back then to the unpopular opinions. Here we have one from Max. Max says, we run so much better as a selling club, buying players for championship or lower and selling them on. Those signings always seem to work out better for us than your big name expensive players. Yeah, again, hard to disagree with this. I think what we have to take into consideration is how much football has changed over the years. You know, Max, I think, has commented a few times discussing players like Tim Cahill and Leighton Baines, who come from championship clubs and ultimately went on to be really big figures at Everton Football Club. I know some people don't like the use of the word legend, but you know, players like that are the closest things I've known to an Everton legend during my time supporting the football club. I do think football has changed a lot. Yes, there is still quality in the Championship, and I'm not saying there isn't still quality in the Championship. I'm not saying that, you know, there's not players there that Everton could bring in that would come in and do a job for us. Is there players in the Championship that Everton could bring in that would go on and be stalwart, you know, legends of the football club and play 300, 400, 500 times? Maybe there is, but I think recruitment as a whole has changed that much over the years that going into the Championship with the view of bringing a first team player in, it just doesn't quite work like that anymore, does it? Yes, teams will still go and buy from the Championship, of course they will, but it would usually be players that were going to come in and were going to form part of a squad and maybe even go out on loan or maybe get an opportunity but not really be a first teamer straight away. You know, back in the day, you could go and buy a Championship player and they could play every week in the Premier League without any real sort of proof of them proving themselves, whereas now I don't think it's like that. I think football has changed that much that you know, it's just not the case. If you've got a team that are, you know, one place above you in the Premier League table and you're wanting ultimately next season to, you know, to improve on your position and ultimately finish above that team, and they go out and spend £35 million on a central midfielder from France or Italy, then, you know, you going into the Championship and spending 12 million on one isn't maybe the way you're going to look to do it. There's absolutely no doubt that some of Everton's best players who've ever played in the blue shirts have come from those lower league clubs and have come from, you know, leagues like the Championship and stuff, and obviously have come into Everton. Players like Tim Cahill, Phil Jagielka. I know Mikel Arteta didn't come from lower league in England, but he wasn't from a, you know, he wasn't taking a step down. Let's put it that way. Obviously, as we've mentioned, Leighton Baines, etc. So, yeah, I get it, but I'm just not quite sure Everton are in the position to do that. As the term selling club, I've never really had an issue with, because I think every football club in this world is a selling club, barring maybe Manchester City and, maybe then Bayern Munich, or, the top one or two clubs in every league, maybe you could argue against, but every other club below ultimately becomes a selling club, maybe other than the ones that are owned by states as well. Maybe you could argue against them. But for me, I'm always of the opinion that if a player comes into Everton Football Club for £40 million and you say to me, right, Cam, you're going to sell him for £100 million in 2 seasons, then that means ultimately not only have Everton brought in £100 million, which looks good on the financial front, which obviously we're struggling with at the moment and have been struggling with for the last couple of years, but also if a player has come in to the football club for £40 million and has been sold for 100, then they've obviously performed well. They've obviously impressed. They've obviously taken Everton to a stage where we are much better than what we were prior to them coming in. So therefore, I don't particularly mind that at all. And like I said, some of the biggest clubs in the world over the years have had really, really big players and have had to sell them for huge money in order to reinvest in their squad to get better. And that is ultimately what football is about. Unless you are owned by a huge state and you can spend as much money as you want, the reality is if you want to become better, you have to get better players. Better players cost more money, and to make more money, you need to do things like sell your players for the bigger fee. So, let's take Jared Brandtwaite for an example. If Everton were to sell Jared Brandtwaite in the next 2 years, which I hope we don't, by the way, because I absolutely love him, but if we were, which is very possible that happens, then let's say Everton sell Jared Brandtwaite for £150 million, which is exactly what he's worth, by the way, and I won't take it any other way. If we then go and reinvest that £150 million in 4 or 5 really, really top quality players, now I know that's the big if, because we could invest it on a load of shite as we've done in previous years and end up being worse off. But if the recruitment is working as it should be and we go and invest it on 4 or 5 really good quality players, then ultimately Everton become a better team. We might be able to get a better centre-back than Jared Brandtwaite, but we might be able to get a decent centre-back that can do a job and a better striker or a better winger or a better centre midfielder. And therefore we become a better team overall. So, yeah, again, I understand where you're coming from and definitely elements to it that I agree with. Max is back with another one. He says, we could do a lot worse than getting Ross Barkley back when Luton inevitably go down. Yeah, I'm not with that one. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I think we had this one last time or something similar last time about Ross Barkley and about how he would have been suited to an Everton return. I think when we did the last episode, it was when we were struggling to win games, when we were struggling to put teams away. Obviously, a lot has changed since then. We're in really, really good form now. 3 wins on the bounce, out of the relegation zone. Obviously, we've had the points deduction and we're still doing really well. But my opinion on this hasn't changed, and that is that I wouldn't have Ross Barkley anywhere near Everton Football Club. Not because I think he's a truly awful footballer. I think he's still a talented player. I think he's still got things to offer. I think he's still got quality. I think he's still got ability. But firstly, he's always had and continues to have massive injury problems and problems keeping fit for long periods of time. And secondly, and more sort of importantly for me, is he has a broken relationship with Evertonians. And for him to come back, it would mean him fixing that relationship with Evertonians. And if he doesn't fix that relationship with Evertonians, then the moment he comes back and doesn't perform or doesn't go into a sliding challenge or doesn't score an easy chance or doesn't stay fit for more than 3 weeks, then all of a sudden there's a reason to get on his back. There's a reason to have a go at him. I think for Ross Barkley to come back to Everton Football Club, he would have had to have been absolutely world class for the last few years. I think the Rooney argument is different. People always say, well, Rooney come back, but Rooney left Everton and went on to be one of the best footballers in the world. I mean, he was one of the best footballers when he was at Everton, but he went on to win multiple Premier League titles, Champions Leagues. He was one of the best in the world, went on to be the top goal scorer at the club that he moved to, the top goal scorer in the country altogether. And obviously, granted, when he come back to Everton, he was a lot older and he wasn't quite at that level that he was at Man United. But you could look and you could go, yeah, but even a 30-odd-year-old Wayne Rooney still, technically, will be one of the best football players at this club. Ross was a good player, but if he was to come back to Everton, would he be one of the best players at the football club? Would that be worth the situation that he currently has, the negative relationship with the fans? I don't think it would be. I don't think he's good enough to warrant that decision being taken. I'll be perfectly honest. But listen, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. That's why we are here, of course. Another one then. We'll do a few more and then we'll finish up because I'm aware that this video's gone on for half an hour already. Connor says Sam Allardyce deserved another season. Again, similar to the Barkley stuff, really. I think Allardyce was always coming in with a target on his back. He was obviously brought in to replace Ronald Koeman just before Marco Silva was given the job midway through the season, and it was so evident that Everton needed to move Ronald Koeman on because of how toxic it become and how poor Everton were, that the options at the time, I think the owner thought, we need to get somebody in that's going to stabilise us, we need to get somebody in that's going to evade any form of relegation talk or relegation feeling, steady the ship, calm us down, and then we'll reassess it in the summer. And I think, to be fair to Allardyce, he did that. I know a lot of Evertonians don't like Sam Allardyce and don't look back at Sam Allardyce's time at the football club in particularly good light, but he come in, he stabilised us. Would we have gone down if he hadn't have come in? I don't think we would have. I think we'd have been all right with a number of different managers coming in. I think a number of managers would have stabilised us. I don't agree with this whole Sam Allardyce was the only manager that could have come in and done that to Everton. I just don't agree with that. I think there was a lot of managers that would have been able to come in and do what he did. But nevertheless, he still did it. He come in, he stabilised us, he kept us up, he gave us a top half finish. He spent a lot of money on two of the worst players I've ever seen in an Everton shirt for what they cost. And then he was moved on and Marco Silva was brought in. Was it a little bit harsh? Maybe. But to give the owner a bit of credit for once, which is not something I do often on this channel because I think he is absolutely terrible. But in football, and football is a business, and in business sometimes you have to make ruthless decisions. And whilst I don't think Sam Allardyce was the worst manager in the world, and whilst I think he did what he was asked to do, there was also a clear discontent amongst the fan base for his style of football, for the way he had Everton playing, for some of the things he said in press conferences, for having Sammy Lee as an assistant. And I don't particularly disagree with, and didn't disagree with at the time, the decision to move him on and then go and bring in somebody that the club thought was going to be a progressive coach and was ultimately going to be here for a number of years. Obviously that didn't work like that, so you could say, well, maybe we would have been better keeping Allardyce. It would have been cheaper keeping Allardyce, but you know what? Would Allardyce have lasted the full season after? I'm not sure he would have. There was a lot of fans that weren't happy. There was a lot of fans that were discontent. And I know we always say, oh, well, I don't care how we play or how boring it is as long as Everton win. That's all that matters. But we weren't winning every week. We done better than what we were, but we weren't winning every week and winning the title. That would be a different conversation then, wouldn't it? So, yeah, I do... I do see where you're coming from in the sense of that he maybe should have been given a little bit more time because he ultimately was brought in to do a job and he did that job. But I also understand the reasons as to why he was moved on. Let's jump back into the comments then, and then we will do one more because I think that would round us up nicely. And then any we haven't done, I do apologise, and we will keep them for the next video. In fact, I will bookmark them now so that we can do them on the next video. If you enjoy this type of content, then maybe we'll do another one next week. Maybe we will we'll do one of these every sort of couple of weeks or so if people enjoy them. If you are enjoying, by the way, please hit the like button. It does only take a second if you are new to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe as well. That would mean a huge, huge, huge amount to me. Kenny says, unpopular opinion, Decore is one of the worst technical footballers to ever play the game. Makes up for it with his positional sense and a heart as big as the Mersey. Interesting one. That is one that we've had, I'll be honest. We're not going to discuss it in today's video because we are getting, the time is getting on. But what I will say is Abdoulaye Doucouré's positional sense is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And it helps him hugely when it comes to scoring goals and putting in good performances. It really, really is. It really, really is. Where are we then? Where are we? Abigail says, COVID affected us with gate receipts and sponsorship deals we cut short, and the Kazoos, they couldn't afford the deals with Villa as well. Sanzo, Tossen and Klassen were the worst signings. Interesting. Jack says Carlo wasn't the mistake. It was that cop-out Benitez. Blue Cali says Richie's the only player I would like back. Toffee says we need championship starters on the bench to help us. The Blue says if we were going to take Barkley, it should have been as a free as depth last summer. Better than Gomez for cheaper. That's the only argument for Barkley. Yeah, I suppose so, yeah. Abigail says, we are one of the worst teams for expanding our commercial presence. I'm not sure that's an unpopular opinion, Abigail. I think that's a pretty blatant fact that we all know of and we've all been talking about for a number of years. But you are right. We are horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. Gamba says, the real amount collected by selling players by Everton's board made public does not really affect reality. Sam says, I think we started to build an identity with us versus everyone, a la Memphis Gilzees. Bringing in a former player like Barkley might not help that. Good point. Gang says, hit the likes, people, up the toffees. Is right, if he could hit the likes, it would mean a huge amount to me. And Blue Cali says, I'm enjoying this season's team, even with all the crap going on for the first time since Martinez's first season. Yeah. And Jack says the players on the bench now are helping contribute to goals. Beto and Dobbin both scored after being subbed on. Absolutely. Kingsley says, good day, Cam. Just joined. What do you mean about Carlo? We should have got Dicey earlier. No. So, if you're new to the channel or this show, this is Unpopular Opinion, where we take your unpopular Everton opinions and we discuss them, and I bring my opinion on them. The Carlo one was that Carlo Ancelotti's sort of time at Everton affected the club horrendously and ultimately set us back financially, and we've just spoken about it. So if you haven't checked it out, either go back and check it out, or I'll be clipping it up and putting it on TikTok later. So go and follow us on TikTok, TheMightyBlues EFC, and you'll see it there. Big thanks for joining us though. Yeah, let's jump back in then and do the final one, which I think is a really interesting one. Lenny says, Mikel Arteta doesn't get the credit he deserves because of the way he left. He was a far superior player to the likes of Cahill, for example, who the fans seem to idolise. Same can be said for Lescott, the best centre-mid and centre-back we have had in the Premier League era, respectively, by a mile. The reason I've chose this one is because I think it's really interesting, and I actually agree with elements of this, and what I agree with is that for me, growing up, if you'd have asked 6, 7, 8-year-old Cam who he believes the best player at Everton Football Club is, I would have said Mikel Arteta without a shadow of a doubt. Even when Tim Cahill was in that team, even when we had Leighton Baines in there, Marouane Fellaini in there, I believe, for a couple of years or so. We obviously have players like Yakubu, in there as well. I would have still said Mikel Arteta was the best player at Everton Football Club. Mikel Arteta, growing up for me, was the best player I'd seen in an Everton shirt. Obviously, as you grow older, you start to see more of Leighton Baines and appreciate his quality. And then obviously we've just spoken about James Rodriguez and his technical ability. But growing up for me, Mikel Arteta was technically the best player I'd ever seen in Everton Football Club. Now, he obviously hasn't got a great relationship with Evertonians because of A, the way he left, and B, the way he portrayed himself when he come back playing for Arsenal. However, Lenny is right. That can't take away from the fact that he was one of the best players we've had in the Premier League era, technically. Is he the best we've had technically in the Premier League era? Well, I suppose you could caveat it with different arguments. Wayne Rooney played for Everton in the Premier League era. He technically, obviously, is a much better player than Mikel Arteta. James Rodriguez played for Everton in the Premier League era. Granted, these players only played for a short period of time, whereas Arteta played for much longer. So, if you're saying you can't use Arteta, you can't use Kale, you can't use, ignore me, long day. You can't use Rooney, you can't use James, then yeah, he probably is up there. I know some people will say, what about Leighton Baines, this and the other, but Arteta was a fabulous, fabulous footballer. It was a joy to watch Mikel Arteta. It really, really was. It felt like he could do absolutely everything with the ball. He could score from set pieces. He could score from long range. He could move the ball into good areas. He could create. He could do everything with the ball, Mikel Arteta. He was a fabulous, fabulous footballer. Lescott, again, I don't have too much of a stronger opinion on, because I personally believe Jagielka was a better in his prime than what Lescott was. Some people would disagree with that. But yeah, I get this one. And the reason I love doing this show, The Unpopular Opinions, is because sometimes I'm presented with an opinion that I would never have thought about before. But when I'm presented with it, I find myself agreeing with it. Yeah, the opinion is Arteta doesn't get the credit he deserves because of the way he left. He was far superior player to the likes of Cahill. Was Arteta technically a better footballer than Tim Cahill? Yeah, I think he was. Does he get the credit he deserves for his quality? No, but I also understand why he doesn't, because of the way in which he left and the circumstances in which that happened. So I get it. I understand it. But I also understand people that would say, but he was still top quality, regardless of the way he left or what he did when he come back. He was still an unbelievable player for Everton who doesn't get spoken about an awful lot. And I suppose that's the point you're trying to make. So, yeah, interesting one. Let us know your thoughts on that one in the comments, and we'll round it up a bit there. I mean, let's have a look at some of the comments on that one, because I think it's really, really interesting. La Flame says, how you doing, lad? I'm all good. Hope you're doing well. Gang says, good shout, that was good time under Carlo, but defo knocked us back. Blue Cali says, loved Arteta, would have loved him as a manager if he'd have got him before Arsenal. Scotty says, I don't use Twitter or social media, but I would like to discuss the idea of our coach Sean Dyche as a Champions League coach. When he gets some money and a big club behind him, he will. I don't know. Don't get me wrong, I'd love him to be a Champions League coach with Everton, but ultimately, we don't know whether or not that's going to happen. Gamba says, we don't have to all agree, but the Blues need better players with the amount spent. And Sophies versus Red says, if Arteta never went to Everton, he would have probably had nothing in his future. I don't know. I think he would have made the move to the Premier League at some point, but yeah, he was a special player, talent-wise, Mikel Arteta. There's no arguing about that whatsoever. Anyway, I think we're going to leave it there. As I said, big thank you to everybody for getting involved. Huge thank you to everybody for sending in your opinions on Twitter. If you want to get involved in the next episode, firstly, you've got to like this one and let me know that you actually like this. If you're watching the live comments, just briefly before we go, do you enjoy this type of content? Do you like it? Do you think it's a good idea? I've never really seen it done before, so I'd like to know what people think. If you're watching the YouTube video, leave your thoughts down below and we'll get involved with as many of them as we can as well. And yeah, if you have given an opinion and it hasn't been spoken about, we'll save it and we'll discuss it next time if we do another episode as well. But yeah, until then, massive thank you all for watching. We'll be back over the next couple of days, of course, with another video, so don't forget to look out for that. But yeah, big thank you all. If you've enjoyed it, please do leave a like. It would mean a massive amount to me if you're new to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Go and follow us on TikTok, TheMightyBlues EFC. Follow us on Twitter and everywhere else. You know the score. But yeah, big thank you all for watching. Up the toffees, and we'll see you after.